you again for joining and taking some time and joining our call. Now, you definitely had other opportunity to spend your time somewhere else, and it could be evening for some of you. So really appreciate the time you have taken to be with us and listen to what we had to say. So today's webinar is all about secrets. I call it as secrets, but if you drill deeper, there won't be any secrets. Some of these common sense items, right? And some of them are not necessarily common sense, are necessary in terms of preparing yourself to be able to recover your entire cloud environment resources after a ransomware attack. It's a scenario. It's not about preventing ransomware. That is not our it's not in our purview of the control. In our case, because we are a recovery vendor, not necessarily a prevention type of vendor. There are like 1,000 security products that analyze environments to be able to say, yes, you have been attacked or not attacked, and so on. Appranix comes into play when the recovery is important, and especially when things are really bad in terms of the number of attacks. And these attacks are nowadays really considered to be cyber disasters, not necessarily, oh, it is an attack. It's about getting your applications back and also getting your businesses back and running, right? Unless your applications are back, most of the businesses are software enabled to an extent, and more and more businesses are software enabled. So if that is the case, without recovering your applications, the business is not going to continue to operate, right? So that's why we call it cyber disasters. And I'm not going to go through all the numbers. And if you searched today, you will find 15 more ransomware attacks and 5 different ways of getting attacked in different segments. Overall, when you think about the recovery alone, it's not necessarily the time it takes to recover the application environment, it's also the cost to recover, right? So time is money, but on the other hand, you will actually spend actual dollars to be able to recover in terms of infrastructure, in terms of consulting, in terms of other activities, and sometimes it happens to be much, much higher than the actual ransom that you might have paid, right? And the approach that ransomware attackers take varies, but in general, if you look at what Gartner has to say about the process of that attack and how you can prepare yourself, you think about it, the first thing is detecting the attack, right? Okay, so I understand that there is some kind of an anomaly and that there may be an attack, and you understand that there is an attack that really happened. Now you'll have to really think about the systems that are protecting your data, the systems that are protecting your dependencies configuration, the state of your application environment. And now you should be able to say, yes, the data is safe, so I don't have to pay the ransom if ransom was demanded, assuming that the systems were attacked and somebody is demanding the ransom. So you may be in a situation where you noticed it, but nobody demanded that, so you're totally fine, so you can protect more. But even in the case where you are negotiating with some ransomware attacker, you have a protected environment using your data backup systems. That is assumed to be the case. Sometimes what happens is the sophisticated attacks really go to the backup consoles directly, and then if they take over the backup console, it's going to be really, really problem in terms of recovering, to be able to recover your data, right? And now, assuming that your backup is okay, you have to now recover. I should be able to recover really, really quickly, and that's where a lot of delays comes into play. So if you think about typical attack and the recovery lead times and the cost associated with it, so average business disruption roughly is about 23 days. This is based on last year's analysis, this year analysis from the security vendors are not up there yet. These are some of the ransomware insurance providers collect the data, and also consulting companies that really specialize in the ransomware recovery collect the data. So 23 days in terms of average business disruption. And then the payment has changed. It has, from the educational services and the security services segment of the market used to pay about $1 million on an average. It has come down last year. And right now it stands across the board, education, hospitality, and manufacturing, and some other segments included is about 220K, right? A typical ransomware payment. And after that is done, now you have to really recover your environment. That takes about 6 days on an average. Again, it varies depending on the complexity of the environment, and your business may differ, but in general, it takes about 6 days. Now, the question is, why 6 days? Because you already, I understand that the disruption happened, you negotiated, and then you paid something, and then now you are in the recovery mode. And at least you can control what you can control, right? The previous two, you may not be able to control completely. But the last one, you can control. And that's what we are going to focus on. How fast can you recover your entire application environment? Not necessarily just the environment, or the individual services and so on. And there are well-architected framework considerations from, I'd say, AWS. I'm putting an example of AWS. So security and reliability are the key components that you will have to really continuously watch and modify to make sure that you adapt the best practices from well-architected framework. Now, when I talk about a system, I'm sure you might have seen these presentations before. So again, for the sake of just repeating it, when we talk about a system, I'm talking about a system like this, right? A system that has all kinds of dependencies is an application system. One application system could be as complex as this. And this is a real life system which runs and takes care of about $16 billion in mortgage payments every quarter. And that has all kinds of moving components, the dependencies, the configurations, and so on. Now, the question would be, from a recovery perspective, you want high availability. Well, high availability is kind of done if you are in a disaster recovery mode, right? Cyber disaster recovery mode. In that case, can you recover all of these instances, all of the configurations, all of the dependencies, all the databases, actual data, and the metadata, everything put together? How long does it take? That's roughly on an average about 6 days, which means it's a median, right? I'm sorry, it's average. So which means that you have a lot more days depending on the complexity of the environment, and it could be just 1 day, but can you afford even that 1 day? What's the cost of that, right? So let's think about all the secrets for this recovery, right? So let me just build this entire thing. First thing first, the secret but no secret is that know what you have, right? Which means that you'll have to, you should be able to discover your distributed application environment resources running on the cloud, which means that continuous discovery is important because things are changing all the time. So ability to discover all the VM security groups and network and identity and load balancers and VPs, all of that really make up. Phoenix, for example, discovers about 44 different resource types on AWS alone, and then similar number on Azure and GCP. So that's about knowing what you have, because things get added to the environment, right? If you think about this part, your configuration changes occur all the time. And those configuration changes, the changes to the environment, might be done because there are several DevOps pipelines coming into play. And several team members through console, cloud console, or through API or CLI modifying your application environment, right? The third-party tools are modifying your environment. Now, when this happens, what is your confidence level in terms of understanding what you have? So let's take that as a secret number one. So let's understand this first. Second thing is to be able to really kind of blueprint, after your environment is built. It's almost like you built your house without a blueprint, right? Roughly some kind of an idea. Now you have to really build that blueprint. How do you do that? So the ability to automatically build a blueprint paves the foundation or the secret to be able to recover. Because without a blueprint, you don't know which one to recover and what are the connected components of it. Now, third and fourth is about actual data. It's assumed that you have some kind of a capability to be able to copy from your production environment and move your data to an isolated location where the modifications are not allowed, right? It could be in a completely different VPC. It could be in a completely different region altogether, right? Away from the attack surface, because your production is attacked, and if you are not careful, your backup console might be running in the same region as your production, typically, right? Maybe in a hub account or in one of the accounts, or maybe if your environment is large enough, then you need to have multiple backup installations or the backup managers running in your environment. So you should be able to really protect that. The secret is to be able to move that copy, a point-in-time copy, to a different region altogether, completely kind of immutable. Nobody can modify it until it actually is asked to be modified, right? Now that you have the capability to isolate your copies, now what happens? The fifth one is cloud configuration. So all the cloud configurations, the size of the compute, and the type of compute, the connectivity dependencies, right? All of that need to be properly understood. We call it as a metadata, and then plus some other data to be able to recover your environment. Now, after doing all of that activity, assuming that these are like some kind of a system that is running, or you might have put together various systems together to be able to have the confidence to be able to recover, right? The sixth and the most important part is that how do you really program all of that, right? Use all the data that you have and program the cloud for actual recovery. And that's a harder part, because one is to be able to understand and then to be able to discover. Second thing is able to protect. And third thing is, when you program the cloud, you need to know how the cloud really works, and regions differ. So regional recovery programming is different, right, than your production environment program. So even if you programmed or deployed using some kind of an infrastructure as code in your production environment, when you go and try to recover in some other region, it's completely different. I would say, 100% different, but it is different enough that your production infrastructure as code will not run, right? Besides the point in terms of pulling the data, pulling the metadata, all of that together. So the ability to program the cloud, depending on the cloud and depending on the infrastructure as code built for the cloud provider, not a third party, because third party is a layer above and you may not be able to depend on it completely at the time of failure and at the time of recovery. So go as native. In fact, the native infrastructure as code is the best way or the secret to be able to recover. I'll skip that because we went through this. Now, in a situation where you will have to deal with multiple layers. So the layers are at the network level. It could be, again, layers of network, right? I'm not going into the details. So roughly about 8 to 10 different layers of complexities that you will have to take care. In real life scenario, every one of these layers might involve several teams. And typically the network and the load balancer team may be together sometimes, but when it comes to the VMs, the network configuration with respect to VMs, there may be some other team. The data team is different, the database team is different, right? And then the application images, all those changes that occurred over a period of time before that happened are coded into are kind of incrementally captured by the application images. And then for encryption and so on, you will have to really bring all the encryption and certificates back. And then finally, you put together the DNS so that you can access your applications appropriately. And I wish the layers are as linear as it looks, but that is not the case, right? When you go to the real life scenario, the layers are much more complicated, right? The layers are intermingled. The layers are connected to each other. The layers are dependent on each other in the sense that you need to be able to build one first and then maybe next, and then and along the way you will have to build something different. As we speak, there is recovery that is going on for a financial services customer, right? And the cloud has changed over a period of like last few months. So it becomes a complicated scenario for you to be able to confidently say, right, that you are in a position to recover in the event of a failure. And you're not without help, right? The backup systems really help. If you look at, the data compared to 2020 and 2021 or 2022, overall, the backup systems have really helped in terms of reducing the amount of ransomware payments, because now you have a capability to at least bargain with your an encryption attacker, if you will, to be able to recover back. And you can also protect using data replication, right? There are approaches that are used by snapshots and things like that. But again, they are great mechanisms to be able to recover really fast, and we use that too. But how do we really use it? So if you think about existing systems, again, the secrets, right? To be able to discover is very, very key. None of the systems are capable enough at the moment to be able to discover the entire application environment. Then now, if you loaded another data management system on top of your application environment of the data, now you have to really protect that, right? You can do it better. And third, to be able to have the confidence, right? You should have tested your recovery capabilities often enough so that in the event of an attack, you have a mechanism to go after. Without that, you will be just assuming the assumptions will actually kill the business, right? So the capability to be able to create that environment on demand will not only save the cost, but also give you that recovery confidence, right? And please do not forget to protect all your network and security services. And that's why Appranix was born. And we have done this many, many times. And if you look at the number of steps I put in a nice rounded 15 steps here compared to what's happening now and what's possible with Appranix. It's night and day, right? And we have done this over a coffee break, and that's why people love it, right? Some of these comments, I cannot put it on the social media, if you will, but that's the level of help that we have given to many enterprise customers and the smaller customers as well, because it's a SaaS. You can go from 2 instances to 2,000 resources or 20,000 resources, or 100 and plus in AWS accounts and so on. So that's totally fine with us. So the way we do it, the way we kind of help you with those secrets is that we have pretty much automated all of that using a system that automatically discovers and maps those dependencies and creates those blueprints and creates something called a time machine. So just imagine that you have a cloud time machine with no agents. You are able to protect your environment in the same region and in another region completely air-gapped. And now, you have all the metadata copies and all the network services backup and DR. What to do with the actual data? The actual data, we leverage the cloud built-in backup capabilities, built-in data replication capabilities, built-in database copy capabilities to be able to protect in different locations based on, again, your policies, your organization policies, so that you have complete control of the number of copies that you are able to make and retain, right? So once you have that copy, now the question is, how fast can we recover? This is where Appranix really makes a huge difference, because we are in the business of cutting down that 6 days, right? You should not go through 6 days. You should be able to do, less than 2 hours, less than 1 hour, depending on the environment. We have done it within 15 minutes as well, right? We'll go through one of the small environment tests today. Now, just imagine that, right? You have your, again, taking AWS as an example, you can do it with the GCP or Azure. So just imagine that you have your applications running in the AWS region 1, and you have all the immutable cloud machine which is taking care of all the metadata copies, dependencies, all of that, and all your actual data copies are residing within your own account, but somewhere else. That is nothing to do with your production environment, right? And just imagine all 3 combinations, and you have basically an additional level of protection with Appranix, because this is away from your regular cloud, right? We are running in some other cloud than AWS, and we leverage AWS when necessary and leverage Azure when necessary, right? So it's running here. And once everything's done, from your immutable forever incremental data copy, the entire environment gets created. Now, if you have that capability, of course, you don't buy a system just for one particular use case, right? You can use it for a bunch of other capabilities as well. For example, for your regular backup, you may not have to get rid of the existing backup solutions that you might be really comfortable. You are comfortable, let's continue with that. But all other resources, all other database not related to the database, right? You can protect using Appranix for much faster recoveries, right? And once you graduate from that, you can pretty much push your application resiliency using chaos engineering techniques, as an example. Because if you run chaos engineering, you have to reproduce your production environment to be able to inject the failures, right? Inject a pseudo ransomware attack type of scenario, right? Change the configurations, introduce chaos into that environment and check if you are in a position to recover or not, right? So that is all possible with our system. It's not going into the pricing aspect. We can always touch base later on if you are good to go. Now, let's run through a quick demo as well. So here, just imagine you have your application in one of the regions, right? All these applications, for demo purpose, I'm using only the smaller instances. And this application happens to be critical for hospitals, right? Open emergency medical records application. It's EMR. And now, if this environment is taken over, right, your application is not accessible, which means that all the hard work that you did, right, to put together, to deploy all of these wonderful, cloud resources, and can see just RDS alone. If you go into the parameter groups, there's so many combinations of configurations that you will have to really include to be able to run your applications and the data, right? It's like 30 different pages and 460 different combinations of configurations just for a simple database, right? And VPC has all kinds of intermingled services, and those services continue to be enhanced, and newer services are introduced by the cloud providers. Now, just assuming this is a very simple environment, and this environment is now inaccessible because of some kind of a cyber disaster. And this is where you use Appranix. So with Appranix, assuming that you registered your cloud connection, you call it as a cloud connection, yeah. And within that cloud connection, you can discover all your environment continuously, right? All the compute, and if you look at all the metadata and everything are captured continuously by our system, and it kept encrypted for your particular account, or your particular cloud account. Even if you have multiple cloud accounts, they're all separated and protected using encryption, 256 encryption. at rest as well as en route as well. Now, all of that lead to something called a cloud assembly, a rough representation of your application, business application. If you look at that representation, will look like this, right? Don't worry, you don't have to assemble all of that. All you have to provide is the top level resources that really make up your application. So in this particular case, you simply just click those open EMR, web service, app service, and DB service, or you simply add the tags and tell us what are those tags that really assemble that application environment. And here, everything else will be automatically assembled. So you might have like 17,999 resources, just like one of our customers, right? Literally 17,999 resources as of like today. And for this particular application, there happen to be only 34 resources, right? So our system will automatically identify those related components, the automatic dependency mapping. We call it as reverse blueprinting, if you will, right? Blueprint create the blueprint of your application continuously, not just one time, continuously, depending on your policy. So you could say hourly policy, weekly policy, daily policy. And if you go to some of the other configurations here, you can see 7 different policies, right? And this has been running for 2+ years now. You can stack them up. So the data copies, these policies pretty much control the metadata as well as the data copies, your application, your database copies, your EBS and EC2 or GCP VMs or Azure VM, all those copies are made incrementally. So even if your application teams, the DevOps teams continue to change your system, just imagine that, right? So many DevOps pipelines nowadays, they will continue to change your applications, your configurations. All of that will be captured automatically, right? Incrementally. So you don't kind of pile up your cost, right? You don't end up paying to your cloud provider. Now, the key thing is your actual recovery environment is not running. Only the data has been copied over to another region, or you could choose to copy beyond 2 regions as well if you wanted more resiliency compared to just 2 regions. You can copy easily based on policies. Now, once you complete that, Appranix automatically builds that Appranix time machine, your cloud time machine. A very simple concept, and the UI looks very simple as well. That's the idea. But what's happening underneath is that all your compute, all your resources, all your cloud services are metadata of that, are the configurations, the dependencies are made as incremental copies to be able to recover full at any point in time in another region of the cloud. So in this particular case, it's going to be in California. So if you go to the California region, you'll see there are no load balancers, as opposed to the Virginia region, you have plenty of load balancers for a simple application like that, right? And if you go to the instances running, nothing here in the California region. Now, we should be able to bring back all that component of the services, dependencies, everything together so that we are able to recover, right, all your instances or entire application back. So let's do that right now. Assuming that you have been attacked, assuming that you have paid the ransom, if the ransom was paid, or you realize that there was some kind of an attack, you want to kind of take out your production environment and run your production somewhere else in the other region, maybe in California, until you figure out what's happening, clean all the production environment. That's, again, a very proactive measure, but it comes down to that average 6 days recovery time. And that's the painful one, right? It is under your control, or supposedly under your control. If that is the case, how fast can you recover? Let's check it out. I'm not going to other options. You have options to recover in the same region, use the same VPC, existing VPC, all of that good stuff for your local backup recoveries. In this particular case, it is a straightforward other region recovery that needs to be run, ransomware recovery, right? recovery. Now, you simply select, create, and isolate. One of the recommendations from Gartner is that isolated recovery environment. They call it this IRE, a recovery environment. So create an isolated recovery environment and recover. And if you are just doing the testing before the cyber disaster and things like that, DR test, you simply enable that reset. After 1 hour, you can automatically reset. All you do is click that button. You can, by the way, call from your DevOps pipeline, right? And then if you go into the resources, all your network load balances, the subnets, the internet gateways, all are getting created in the other region. So let's take a look at what's happening in the other region, right? Northern California, there's nothing here. A stack has been initialized, coded, programmed by Appranix. So you can see the resources coming up here. If you look at what has been programmed on the cloud for AWS, is all the dependencies have been based on the discovery at that particular point in time have been created. So you can see all of that wonderful things in terms of dependencies. So, you know, your existing teams may not be able to understand and comprehensively put together the dependency map, obviously, because the environment is changing. You know, every team is taking care of one layer or the other, right? Now, this is where Appranix comes in terms of really understanding your application environment. And you can control it. You know, what's the level of understanding that Appranix has to do. But the key thing is that all of that components and every one of these little dots, right, are configurations that are very important for your instance. A single instance has to come through, and then multiple connections from here to every one of the other components of your application. Your network, your load balancer configurations have to be automatically adjusted as well, right? All of that will be automatically created for you, and can see the environment is coming up. You can see how many resources have been created already, 30 plus resources out of 46. Even though you include only 34 from a highlighted perspective, there are like options groups and other things. So those 46 resources need to be recreated on demand, right? In this particular case, if you go in here, I don't think the load balances are up and running yet, but the instances might be coming up soon, right? See, the instances are now coming up. There was nothing here. It's completely on demand, right? So you have not been paying AWS for all those instances that might be sitting idle, just in case if some kind of a disaster happens, right? You don't have to do that with Appranix. Now, once the recovery is done, you will have a recovery summary report quickly here, and you will have a quick timeline as well in terms of how long it took for you to recover. But once you get it, you can go to the resiliency insights. So you can have the recovery report, and you can look at the recovery reports here, or you can go back in time for your compliance purposes. So if you go to let's say 19th, and I remember this particular date, I keep referring to it, that's why I remember it. Nothing super secret about it, right? And here, we did a recovery back in 2020, November 19th. It took about 3 minutes and 44 seconds. Now, this is all great. Do I have to sit there and do my recovery tests all the time, right? Manually, it's one button. Can you automatically click it? Yes, you can. So what you do is that we have something called automatic simulation policies, as if you are recovering, right? So you can pretty much go and say, recover. You said there is a daily recovery. I should be able to disable this one, right? Because it is running and then creating and costing my, the credit card is actually being spent just because the daily recovery tests are running. So if you think about it, you simply create a recovery simulation, daily, monthly, weekly, and then if the latest timeline fails, it will automatically kick off another one. Then you can say after 4 hours, delete the entire thing, right? That is your recovery simulation policy. So with respect to recovering your environment, it is that simple. The question is, why 6 days? on an average. Right? If there were just one button click, and obviously the cloud provider will take time to recreate all those resources and then make sure that those resources are booted up and connected to the rest of the services and so on. But the reality is that those resources are now programmed to be able to create. So this, depending on the environment type, varies, and it becomes really, really complex. We have done recoveries with 60,000 plus lines of code across multiple stacks that I explained before. So all of that will be done. And then you'll also get all your events if you turned on the change notification mechanism through Cloud Logs or Cloud Trail in your AWS, or similar mechanisms in other clouds as well. So the mechanism is same. By the way, the recovery is completed now. So it took about, took about 5 minutes and 18 seconds. So it happened to be a lengthier day today compared to the regular days, right? And you can see all these 46 different resources have been recreated. Now, you could do the same thing on Azure, right? The mechanism is same. So you go to the timeline, click, and then click recover. The same exact mechanism, right? And all the complexities with respect to the cloud are taken care of by Appranix. So you go to GCP, policies are working, timelines are working, and you simply do exactly the same thing, right? And depending on the cloud, it automatically, zone mapping, and if you happen to select the same VPC, you have different options popping up depending on how you select, right? You can remove the networks out. If you're creating an existing VPC, you can also choose the networks, and then you can map the environment to a different VPC, and then you can do all kinds of combination of mappings and the network subsegments, all of the cool stuff, right? If your application is complex enough. And some of the applications that we have faced are very, very complex, right? We are able to do that. So that's the overall idea. And now if you come back and take a look at the secrets that I was talking about, right? All of them are completely automated. If that is the case, then why does it take 6 days? Right? It should be much faster. So if you're able to cut it down, you can calculate the amount of business that you lose every day, right? We cannot control all of this here, but we can certainly control that. And that's how Appranix really helps. Let me stop here and see if there are questions. Any questions from the audience? You can type it in at the bottom. There is a chat window here. I will repeat the question so that others understand, and we can go from there. Looks like it's a quiet audience today. No worries. We are here. Please reach out to us. It's as simple as info@appranix.com or customer-success@appranix.com to be able to help you out with respect to if you wanted to try. It's all free for 15 days, and we can extend the trial if necessary. So if you're helping other enterprise customers, we will be happy to work with you, because you can also resell the solution. There is a resell nice fee associated with it. We'll pay you. So all of that is quite possible. Nothing comes for free. So we'll help you kind of convince your customers as well in terms of how it helps, right, in the event of a real disaster, real cyber disaster, and how Appranix could potentially help, right? So thank you again for joining the call. I'm sure you had other opportunities to be able to serve as well as being protective. And I'm happy that we are able to get together here to have an insight into what's possible. with respect to recoveries, right? So really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Until next time.